Good morning, everyone. Welcome aboard UFC Vegas 86. Joe Pyfer taking on Jack Hermansson. We have 14 fights inside of the UFC Apex today. 9 out of 14 matchups are currently favored to end inside the distance. And this is one of those cards where there's the potential to be numerous live betting opportunities, live betting opportunities galore today. These fights kick off at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And let's get locked in as we burn through these 14 matchups on your fight morning. We'll make the most of today and we'll get things kicked off in a barn burner of a fight at bantamweight. We've got Daniel Marcos taking on Arichi Lang. Arichi Lang coming in as the plus 195 betting underdog. And you have Daniel Marcos, who has an unblemished record. We saw in the Contender Series, he came back from a multiple year layoff. Daniel Marcos, that is, well-rounded fighter. The Davy Grant performance showed me a lot. There was able to go 3 hard rounds. Contender Series matchup ended up gassing out. He's one of these fighters who can apply pressure, but if he's matched up against someone like Arichi Lang, you are asking for fireworks, my friend. Daniel Marcos will come up top. He'll go down to the body. He'll use some tactical takedowns at times to end rounds. We saw that against Davy Grant. By the way, the coffee's flowing this morning. The thing about this fight that has me concerned, one of the last fighters to the scale, Daniel Marcos. Also, the stare downs, the face-offs. You saw Arichi Lang, he means business every time out, and he appears to be getting better as he's continued his career. Now, he has a 25-11 overall record, but I'm not totally counting out Arichi Lang here. I think if you did get on Daniel Marcos early, there is an opportunity, an ARB opportunity here. I see Arichi Lang hovering around plus 230 at a few different sites, but I have to side with the undefeated fighter in this matchup. He may potentially be drained headed here. He came in at 136.25 pounds and then was able to successfully cut that additional quarter of a pound to make the bantamweight limit. I'm going to be picking Marcos, but this has the potential for fireworks here, my brothers. Now, let's talk Hyder Amel taking on Fernie Garcia. And you watch the undefeated fighter in Hyder Amel comes off of a victory on the Contender Series, and he's taking on a Fernie Garcia who, let's be honest, he's not necessarily a UFC caliber fighter, finds ways to lose, gets outworked, just can't string combinations together, runs into issues down the stretch, and tough looks for Fernie Garcia. One has to wonder, how did he arrive here on this card? I personally thought that Fernie Garcia was sent out to the pasture, but here he is back again. And the thing about this fight is Amiel is never, he's not necessarily a world beater in this fight, in this matchup. This is a stay away fight for me. I think this is one of those bathroom break fights where go get yourself an ice cold beverage, use the bathroom, and come back. I'm going to be picking Amiel here. I don't trust either fighter. Fernie Garcia always fights close, can't pull away in fights. Tough one to call, but Amiel's going to be the pick. Now, Zach Pauga taking on Bogdan Guskov. Guskov coming in as a plus 102 underdog, and I posted pictures when he came in and took on Volkan Ozdemir. He was doing pad work in a commercial airline jet at about 30,000 feet. It was something to behold. He was getting in work wherever he could, but that wasn't an effective strategy once he was locked inside of the UFC octagon. And he's taking on a Zach Pauga, who is one of the lower level fighters in the UFC. This fight takes place at 205 pounds. Fight doesn't go the distance, sitting at minus 360. I have not touched this fight from a betting perspective. Bogdan, he can throw for power, but he's a bit of a glass cannon out there. Watch the way he fights. Whenever he meets adversity, he folds. And Pauga, the problem here is Pauga isn't necessarily a power puncher. He's not a fighter who's going to implement his will on a regular basis. I think that Guskov has the potential here to shock those in attendance at the Apex. I'm going to be picking the underdog in this matchup, but I have no serious conviction in the outcome of this fight. Other than that, I don't think it's seeing the scorecards. Guskov is someone, when he sees blood, he's going to go for it. And that means there's no turning back. And typically, when that happens, you do not hit the scorecards. So give me Guskov to win, and to win so inside the distance. I don't trust Pauga. He's not necessarily a power puncher here, and that's what you need to take Guskov out of there. Now, this is a matchup that has me intrigued. You have Jeremiah Wells taking on Max Griffin. It may come as a surprise to some, but Max Griffin is the older fighter in that matchup. I'm hearing rumblings of Jeremiah Wells, his age, the amount of miles on him, etc. But Wells, less career fights, explosive fighter who's going to push a frenetic pace when it hits the mat. When it hits the mat, things get wild for Jeremiah Wells. He will go 0 to 100 very quickly. And Max Griffin is a fighter who will fight at your pace. He may potentially get sucked into an exchange with Jeremiah Wells, who I believe Jeremiah Wells is the much more powerful striker here. He is aggressive. He is explosive. That does come at a cost, though. Jeremiah Wells, the energy regulation issues could potentially come into play, as they did in the Carlston-Harris matchup. You watch that fight. He was up. Jeremiah Wells was up on Carlston-Harris 2 rounds, dominant fashion, and then got caught in an anaconda choke on the mat. And you saw the post-fight speech outside of the Apex where he was with his team, and he said, "Oh man, that one got away from me. No excuses, but watch out. The next person that he faces inside the octagon is going to be in a world of hurt." And in comes Max Griffin. Max Griffin, as we previously mentioned, 38 years old, closing in on his 39th birthday. He's an athletic fighter who he was taken down by Tim Means, the Dirty Bird, who's not necessarily known as a prolific wrestler. There have been other matchups where Max Griffin's been outworked. And that's the thing. That's the thing about Max Griffin. He doesn't necessarily do anything great. He's a sturdy fighter who is going to He's a durable fighter also. Max Griffin, he sees the finish line most of the time. Now, do I think the takedowns are going to be there for Jeremiah Wells? I do. Do I think that there's a potential for Jeremiah Wells to win this fight inside the distance? May come as a shock to you, but yes, I do believe that Wells can finish this fight by submission or by knockout. Max Griffin is going to have to use his footwork to stay in this fight and prolong the fight, because that's where his path to victory is against Jeremiah Wells. I think that Wells is going to be coming in with a mission here. I'm picking Jeremiah Wells to win this fight. The odds are moving towards a situation where he could potentially be in play here as far as a bet goes, and I'm a believer in Jeremiah Wells. I know that you look at level of competition, Max Griffin, his high watermark, as far as I'm concerned, was his victory over Mike Perry in Orlando, Florida. That was in 2018. But now you look at the amount of mileage, and we haven't seen a lot of wear and tear on him yet as far as injuries go. But you watch Max Griffin, 19-10 overall fighter. So by no means a perfect fighter. Neither is Jeremiah Wells, but I think that there's some value here on Jeremiah Wells at this price. Now, Devin Clark taking on Marcin Prachnio. Interesting matchup where you have Clark, who could get wobbled by a jab. He could get dropped at any point against most fighters at this weight class. And this takes place at 205 pounds. Fight goes the distance, sitting at minus 150. I think that's because most folks expect Prachnio to be on his back early and often. And Prachnio is going to have to get off on the striking here to give himself a chance, because if he's stuck on bottom, that could be the potential for Devin Clark to burn top time, to burn significant time in top position. And I think that that's a real possibility here. I also think that Devin Clark could get bonked at any moment. And Prachnio, that's one thing about him. I mean, you go back and you watch his fight against the redheaded Sam Alvey. Came in very aggressive, overconfident there. Wasn't able to get it done. And Prachnio has a couple of victories here in the UFC that really make folks scratch their head. Roundtree and others. Man, give me Clark to win a decision where he's laying and praying for 15 minutes. Tough fight. I don't want to make a bet on that specific fight. We've got a few comments in the chat room here. Good morning. Good to see you, JP. Thank you. Shady, welcome back. Yes, BP is in a state of slumber in the other room. You can probably, if you listen close enough, you can hear her snoring. She's a very loud snorer. Professor Chaos, welcome aboard. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. Mike, way to be. Big live line move in the Wells Griffin fight. You are correct. Yeah, Clark's dad in the corner of fights gets very animated, and you can hear him from across the county, it sounds like, at times. All right, let's continue this journey, my brothers. We've got Loma Lookboonmee taking on Bruna Brazil. Bruna Brazil plus 235. You watch the face-offs here. You saw Bruna Brazil, much larger fighter, and in most cases, Loma Lookboonmee is going to be undersized. We saw against Lupita Godinez and many other fighters. Her physique doesn't necessarily change. She hasn't packed on any muscle. The cardio hasn't really changed. One thing I will say, her stand-up has gotten it's plateaued. You know, she came in as a Muay Thai fighter who is those are her roots, but she's worked with the Hickman brothers and others through the years. On her grappling, we saw a proficient ground game at times for her. I believe she won her last fight via submission. Lookboonmee, one thing about her, though, is she could be doing well, and then she falls all over the top on fighters. She has mental lapses in many fights, and she's been able to, the Denise Gomes fight, she's been able to right the ship. But for 15 minutes, Loma Lookboonmee, you can't necessarily trust her to fight to her strengths for the entirety of her performance. I don't trust her at minus 290 against Bruna Brazil, who's a bit of a untrustworthy fighter. Bruna Brazil, fragile. If she faces adversity, Bruna Brazil could just check out. And we've seen that in previous fights. I don't trust Bruna Brazil. I'll be picking Loma Lookboonmee, but no bet from my perspective. I think that there are other spots on this 14-fight card where you'd be better served placing your hard-earned money. Give me Loma Lookboonmee in that matchup. Now, you look at this fight that was, we were supposed to have Damir Hadjovic taking on Bolaji Oki. Bolaji Oki, a athletic specimen who won a fight on the Contender Series. And you watched these fighters, Timmy Kwamba, who has a win over Vogel on the Contender Series at featherweight, and he's coming up a weight class here against Bolaji Oki, and I don't trust either fighter in this matchup. This is a fight that they should rerun this fight on the Contender Series, this specific matchup. You watch back the tape, the performance by Kwamba against Vogel, he was technically, I believe, an underdog in that matchup. Not impressed with Kwamba, and this fight didn't necessarily have to happen on this card. I mean, I'm not shying away from additional mixed martial arts action and the canvas to be potentially painted a crimson red after this fight. There's the potential for that to happen. Oki has the potential to end this fight inside the distance via knockout. I think that is on the table here. I also have concerns about the way Oki maneuvers around the octagon. The footwork could be detrimental here. If there's a misstep, Kwamba could take advantage of that. But I'll be picking Oki here, and that is a play that I am avoiding from a betting perspective. I don't trust either fighter in here. I actually brought one of my sons in. We were watching the face-offs. I have a son named Timothy. I said, who, in your eyes, who jumps off the screen at you here? And he was saying that Oki was his potential pick for victory. And I think that the size, the weight class difference is in play here. Now, this is a fascinating matchup. Oh, look at this. JP says he likes Kwamba even on short notice. Okay. And we have the coffees flowing from Pascal, walking the dog. Excellent. Excellent. You're going to be walking the dog? Excellent. All right. Now, Officer Trevin Giles, who I believe is no longer a police officer, plus 205, taking on Carlos Paredes, who is coming in at minus 250. I think this line is another one that's gotten away from us here as a massive, massive favorite. One of the iciest stare downs of the bunch. And you know what Trevin Giles brings to the table. He brings that piston-like left hand. He is going to stick and move. He does have some submissions to speak of. Remember that fight in Texas? And he's taking on a Brazilian juggernaut here in Carlos Paredes, who is going to be my pick, but I want to see this unfold inside of the octagon. I have concerns that there may be the potential for an adrenaline dump if Carlos Paredes is unable to take Trevin Giles out of there. I think that the striking, the ferocity, and the volume on the part of Carlos Paredes is going to be the difference maker in this fight. But I am staying away from this fight from a betting perspective. I think that you look at the fight doesn't go the distance line, minus 280. I think that a finish is going to be forced here. I look at the under 2.5 rather than playing fight doesn't go the distance. I think that Giles, who has been prone to getting taken out of there by fighters who overwhelm him, I think that's in play here. I'll be picking Paredes to win inside the distance, and I don't like that minus 250 number. Now, this is a fight where you have Rodolfo Vieira taking on Armen Petrosyan, and Petrosyan, this is a fight that had been, I believe, rebooked. Rodolfo Vieira sitting at minus 115 at the betting window, and I've bet on Rodolfo Vieira in the past. I know exactly what he brings to the table. He's got the grip strength. He's got the jiu-jitsu. He's got a powerful double leg takedown, a blast double, and then he's going to get back control in most fights. And on the feet, it looks like he's throwing 50-pound sledgehammers with each arm. Very labored out there after that explosiveness goes. And the Cody Brundage victory, I don't write home about that. Cody Brundage was performing extremely well in that matchup. And he's taking on an Armen Petrosyan who has been out-grappled in the past. This fight is inside of the smaller octagon. I think there's a high probability that this fight ends inside the distance. And if Vieira doesn't get Petrosyan out of there early, Petrosyan is one of the live bets I am advocating for throughout this fight. I think that Rodolfo Vieira is going to, once that 7-minute mark comes by, be prepared to look at Petrosyan as a live bet. I don't trust Vieira in this spot. I think that if he does get it done, it's going to be first round submission. But the longer that fight goes, Vieira, especially weight cut after weight cut after weight cut, he busts his butt to get down to 185 pounds. And really, I mean, you look at a fighter who's drawn and sucked out. Vieira is one of those fighters, and he's had some, I believe he had CAT scans done. He had some medical issues with his brain at one point. I believe that Petrosyan's going to win this fight by TKO late, and I don't trust Vieira here. I actually think Petrosyan could win this fight earlier in the fight as well. I think that Vieira is going to force the action here. He doesn't want to mix it up, standing and trading with Petrosyan, who's the much, much more fluid striker. You watched the Leroy Duncan fight, and Petrosyan, I mean, he showed you what he's capable of. And I don't trust Vieira on the feet at all. The Curtis fight, that was an anomaly there as far as I'm concerned. The takedown defense of Curtis was on display, but this is a very, very different fight. I don't trust Vieira, and I'm going to be picking against him here. Armen Petrosyan, and I think the gas tank is going to come back to haunt Vieira in this matchup. Now, we've got a couple more. He looked like death's door on the scale. Yes, he did. He did. Yes. I totally agree. Now, Michael Johnson taking on Darius Flowers. Darius Flowers, who's competed at welterweight, and he has a 12-6-1 overall record here. So it's not necessarily a fighter you can trust. And you want to talk about fighters who are untrustworthy? Look no further than Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson has, he was put out viciously by Carlos Diego Ferreira. And Carlos Diego Ferreira, not necessarily known as a power puncher. Michael Johnson, slick boxing, has footwork. When he commits to his strikes, one of the prettiest strikers in the division, especially as far as hands go. But other than that, he could get blown out of the water here. He could get dropped and finished in a heartbeat. Oh my God. The Malarkey fight. Malarkey should not be picking you apart. Man, this is a tough one here. I see Michael Johnson getting out to an early lead, as he does in many fights, and then I'm having visions of that Josh Emmett fight where the saliva from Michael Johnson's mouth, and I think the mouthpiece went flying. He was totally out cold, and he's been shut off so many times. Michael Johnson, I feel horrible saying this, but if he ends up donating his brain to science, I have concerns. He's a fighter who, I was thinking about the Justin Gaethje matchup recently, how he went full bore in that matchup and gave it literally everything he had. That was an incredible performance by Michael Johnson, but I don't trust Michael Johnson. I think that he has the ability to get his switch flipped and shut off here at any moment. Caddy Daddy says Malarkey almost got him out of that fight. You can see the damage is wearing on him. I agree. I'm picking Flowers here, but Flowers is not a world beater, man. He's somebody who, look at his record, look at the way he fights. Tough call. Give me Flowers here. I think that Michael Johnson, this could be potentially his swan song here. And you saw there was mutual respect when they were facing off here. I think that Flowers is somebody that he's looked up to Michael Johnson. I believe he sought professional career advice from him in the past. And it's one of those things where you get the Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair situation going on. Now, look at this fight. Gregory Rodriguez taking on Brad Tavarez. Brad Tavarez, He's been a very durable fighter, Brad Tavares. I mean, the Edmund Shabazian matchup, what the hell happened there? You look at Edmund Shabazian and what's happened with his career, and Brad Tavares still going strong here, plus 200, taking on Gregory Rodriguez, who is a jack of all trades. I swear, if Gregory Rodriguez had a chin, he could be top 3, top 5 in this division, in the middleweight division. I really believe that. He's got so much going for him. Incredible grappling, great striking, killer instinct. And it's just that he can get shut off. I think it was Vieira who put him out, and we've seen it time and time again on the regional scene as well. Gregory Rodriguez, if he fights to his strengths and does not get clipped, then this is his fight to win. But Brad Tavares, I know he's got Dan Ige, one of his teammates, fighting on this card. And we've seen in the past when Dan Ige has a teammate fighting on this card, it doesn't necessarily mean that both teammates win. We've seen it. Punahele Soriano. Remember that name? Punahele Soriano. Soriano came up short when Dan Ige was on the fight. But we have another Extreme Couture fighter, Brad Tavares, here coming in. And I think that he's going to be game for as long as this fight lasts. You look at fight doesn't go the distance. Here is sitting at minus 150. And I think this is one of those situations where once Gregory Rodriguez gets going and flowing, there's no turning back. He is like a man on a mission. He does not know how to compose himself and regulate his energy. He will see blood, and he will, either from a striking perspective or a grappling perspective, live at the rev limit. And that's a great thing in a lot of cases, because he usually technically is the better fighter. But it could mean that he gasses out, and then Brad Tavares could turn it on and put it on him. But I think that Rodriguez is going to win this fight, and I'm going to be picking him to win. Now, how the hell did this fight end up on the main card? Ihor Poteria taking on Robert Bryczek. Bryczek is a Polish fighter with Octagon experience, out of the Octagon promotion, and he is a fighter with 5 professional losses. I believe he is not a spring chicken at 33 years of age, and he is coming in here to take on Ihor Poteria, who fought his ass off against Bellato. He fought his ass off, and he went for it, was unable to come out victorious, but he had his moments there. And Poteria dropping a weight class here, missed weight. That's a concern. He looked the worst I think I've ever seen a fighter look, where they have not pulled the fighter after they looked horrific on the scales. He barely made it to the face-offs. Watch the face-offs again. Ihor Poteria did not look good at the face-offs. And Robert Bryczek is a fighter I do not trust. I watch his fights. He's a marauder. He's a fighter who also can fold like a cheap tent at times. And both of these fighters, well, Bryczek is extremely muscle-bound. He is a fighter who I don't think has the gas tank to go more than maybe a round and a half. And the under, you can see it here, the under 1.5 is juiced. Last time I looked, it was at minus 260. Fight doesn't go the distance for this particular bout, my brothers, is minus 1,200. So take that into consideration here. I think Poteria is a live underdog for a few minutes. I think that he's going to throw the kitchen sink at Robert Bryczek. I think that he doesn't have much to lose here besides getting his pink slip from the UFC, which is potentially a big deal. So I think he's going to go out in a blaze of glory. And I think that Poteria has the ability to win this fight inside the distance. And I'll be picking him to win inside the distance, mainly because I don't trust this Bryczek fellow. I think that you talk about an adrenaline dump. You talk about going cojones to the wall. I don't trust Bryczek. I think that the under 1.5 is likely to cash. I think the under 2.5 likely to cash. And I'm not a proponent of laying minus 1,200 on fight. Doesn't go the distance. Let's pause and have a gulp of our fresh coffee. Excellent, excellent. Number of comments in the comments section here as we scroll. By the way, if you wouldn't mind liking the video and subscribing to the channel, it's amazing. We had another winning event last weekend, and we are cruising along here. We're attempting to build this channel on a consistent basis. So let's see. Flowers is raw. Let's go through some of the comments section here, and then we'll get back to the Ige Feely fight, which is co-main event. I'm looking forward to that one. Let's see. JP, 14 fights. Yes, it is a landmine of a card. Brada. Tavarez, I understand what you're saying. Kai Kamaka and Punahele Soriano. Oh, my God. Tavarez has trouble finishing a sandwich. But you know what? That chin of Rodriguez, it could come back to haunt him. Debuting 34-year-old fighters, what could go wrong? Great. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you. Appreciate you. So let's get to the co-main event of the evening. We're working our way through. We're at 31 minutes. My goal is to finish this in 45 minutes. Let's see. Dan Ige taking on Andre Feely. This is co-main event of the evening, folks. We have Dan Ige, who's sitting at minus 175 at the betting window, and he's taking on Andre Feely, who's coming off of a victory where he was unscathed, fighting Almeida, where he basically just got off quickly and his punches found the target and got out of that octagon with not only a check, possibly, I think that he may have received a bonus there, 2 checks. And here he is. What he thinks is a winnable fight. And there is the potential for Andre Feely to win this matchup. There are no certainties in this game, but I will say that Dan Ige, you watch the Edson Barbosa fight and many others. Dan Ige, the younger fighter here, less mileage on him. He's going to fight tooth and nail for your money. He's typically a fighter who I have backed from a betting perspective, and I will here as well. I think that in this matchup, if and when he gets on the inside against Andre Feely, he doesn't necessarily have to try to take Andre Feely down. I think that he could go to the body. I don't have major concerns about the clinch fighting of Andre Feely. Andre Feely can get outworked from a physicality standpoint. Andre Feely needs to be fighting at range to be successful. Oh, man, there was a fighter out of Dominic Cruz's gym. I'm pulling up, if somebody could let me know, remind me. I'm pulling up the Andre Feely matchups here in the past. He has had a heck of a career. I faded Andre Feely in that matchup, and he ended up losing. Oh, Miles Jury. He beat Miles Jury. I'll never forget that fight. You saw the range fighting of Andre Feely, and that's one thing that Andre Feely's great at, is range fighting. And Dan Ige can go to the body. And watch back the Dennis Bermudez Andre Feely fight. Andre Feely has the potential. It's to stay standing here. I don't trust Dan Ige to go for takedowns and land takedowns. Remember, Dominic Cruz said it's like taking down a chair or a table with 3 legs. It's very difficult to do when you fight a fighter who's extremely tall. That is Andre Feely. So I think that Ige has the better gas tank in this matchup. I think that he is the much more powerful striker. And he has a full camp here. So I'll be picking Dan Ige to win this fight. At one point, he was in the minus 140s. Now he's in the minus 170s. And I'll be picking Ige. I think that this could potentially turn into a war, this matchup. But I expect Ige to come out the other side. And he's one of those fighters where he checks off a lot of the boxes in regards to fighters who I like to bet on. And the Mitchell fight, last fight out, he, as far as optics go, he had Mitchell busted up there, couldn't get out of the body lock. and he was talking about the lack of urgency that cost him that fight. So I expect him to really get after it in this matchup. And I like Fili, great fighter. Look at this. Brada Ige, you got it at minus 163. Excellent. All right. So we'll see what happens. But Dan Ige is going to be my pick. And I think that he's in a solid spot here against Fili, but he's got to watch out. He can't stay at range and get picked apart. That's Fili's path to victory. He's got to get inside, force the fight, push a pace. And we've seen against Landwehr, Ige's composed, and Landwehr at times was starting to work his way into that fight, and then he'd get dropped. And then Landwehr would try to work his way back into that fight, and then Ige would drop Landwehr again and again and again. So Ige's battle tested. Give me Dan Ige. Now, main event of the evening. We've made it. If you don't mind liking and subscribing to the channel, we were at 750 subscribers. I've posted hundreds of videos, literally hundreds of videos, and we are up well over 100 units, 6 consecutive winning years now, 7th. We are on the winning side so far in 2023 and looking to continue to do so. So please take your time subscribing to the channel here. That's a huge help. We're going to be growing and marching our way onwards to victory. And you want to talk about fighters who are marching towards victory. Joe Pyfer, I believe he's been brought in for this specific fight as a spot to succeed against Jack Hermansson. The challenge is Jack Hermansson is a seasoned veteran. And one thing about Jack Hermansson, I've posted a number of videos or quote tweeted a number of videos where Jack Hermansson, if he is unable to implement his game, he will fold like a cheap tent. And Hermansson, tough as nails. The Talis Lightus fight, we've seen that. He's gonna go for it. There's no doubt in my mind he's gonna go for it. But at 35 years of age, he's gonna have to lock up a submission here against Joe Pyfer to win this fight. I think that inside of the smaller octagon, Jack Hermansson, he's going to try to utilize his footwork. Joe Pyfer is going to be the slower fighter, but the much, much more powerful fighter here against Jack Hermansson. And this is sink or swim time for Joe Pyfer. He's got a fighter in front of him who is going to be fleet of foot, is going to be game, and could potentially try to engage in grappling here. And he may potentially be forced to grapple against Jack Hermansson and Joe Pyfer when they engage. You could potentially see grappling exchanges here. And Jack Hermansson's path to victory is a submission. I don't trust this fight to go 5 full rounds. I think that Pyfer could potentially gas himself out here the longer this fight goes. I think that you are right. If you are going to play Joe Pyfer, that it makes sense to hedge with a Jack Hermansson submission play, because this octagon, you have to remember, it's 30% smaller than the larger octagon. And 5 rounds, that's 25 minutes. And Joe Pyfer packs a punch. So Hermansson bouncing back and forth. We know exactly what Jack Hermansson brings to the table. The thing is, 35 years of age, and we've seen it takes one strike. The Jared Cannonier fight, Roman Dolidze, Thiago Santos, etc. Hermansson will shell up at times and look for a way out if he faces adversity at this stage in his career. The Strickland fight, too, is never able to work his way back into that fight. So my pick is going to be Joe Pyfer in the main event. I think that he's going to get this done inside the distance via knockout. But I understand why folks want to fade the young gun. And I think that you also have to understand why Dana White put him in this position. I think that this is a setup spot for Joe Pyfer in this matchup. So yes, we'll see. We will see what happens. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. We are at 39 minutes. Let's get this done before the 40-minute mark. I have plays up at betmma.tips. We are working our way. You're right. Hey, be like Joe Pyfer. That's what they say. So I'll be picking Joe Pyfer to win, but don't sleep on Jack Hermansson via submission. And let's do this, my brothers. Thank you for tuning into the stream today. Have a great rest of your day. Let's go.